At Intuit, we believe you cannot have prosperity without equality. Women and people of color should not be paid less than men for the same work. 3 years ago, we made a commitment to reach and maintain pay equity for our employees. But pay equity is an ongoing process, and all companies must join this fight. Like the 19th Amendment, we are not done.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited for this session, which requires a little bit of backstory. For many, many years ago, I was in college and had a wonderful friend named Maria Konnikova, who was an amazing writer. And our writing careers both grew in different ways. And I was following Maria and her work at the New Yorker. And then all of a sudden I started seeing these weird articles post saying she was a poker player. And, I'd sort of see them in my feed and I was like, what is going on? Well, let me tell you what's going on. So Maria, and many of you probably have followed this journey in some way, but decided, and I'm very keen to ask her why she decided this, to try and leverage everything she's learned with her degrees in psychology and her writing, to learn to be a poker expert and to chronicle it in a book, which I highly recommend. You can see it's on my Kindle screen here. The Biggest Bluff, How I Learned to Pay Attention, Master Myself, and Win. So I recently had a chance to tear through this book, and am so happy that Maria is here to join us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We've come a long way. I'm sorry we couldn't be at our college reunion this year, but the admiration is so mutual. I've loved watching your meteoric rise, and it's so wonderful to finally have a chance to reconnect.
Well, thank you. And I really also I feel like I learned a lot for this book. I'm kind of a sucker for management books or productivity books or something, and this is just the best of all of that. But let's rewind a little bit. Yeah. So you have, you're accomplished author, had already written several books, accomplished freelance writer. What planted that seed to say, maybe I should learn poker and write about it?
So it actually is almost as random as you make it sound, in the sense that I have never had any interest in poker. Zero. Like, I do not play games. I don't play cards. I didn't have a deck of cards in my house growing up. I actually just verified this on a phone call last night with my parents. I was like, did we have cards? And my mom said, no, we never had cards. So it was something very far from my mind. But I did become fascinated by the topic of luck and the role that chance plays in our lives, and how we can learn the difference between what we control and what we don't. What are the limits of control? Where does it end? What can we do? And how do we recognize when it's time to just stop and basically be done, and recognize that chance is a thing? Because I think it is. And I think too many people give it too little credibility when it comes to success and when it comes to life outcomes. And I told my agent, I want to write about luck. And she said, okay, great. What's the book? Because that's not a book. I mean, saying that I want to write about chance is like saying, all right, let me write, a philosophical treatise that's going to take, I don't know how many thousands of pages. So I needed a way into the story. And as a fellow writer, I don't know if your process is the same, but whenever I become interested in something new, I read a lot. That's always I just immerse myself in books and articles and anything I can lay my hands on. And I love going to the source. I love finding going as old as I can, finding the original stories. Where did all this stuff come from? And during my journey to understand chance, I went to John von Neumann's Theory of Games and Economic Behavior, which I'd somehow never read. I actually still have never read because I didn't finish it because it was really hard going. But I did learn something very, very... I read enough to know that von Neumann was a poker player and that all of game theory actually came from poker. And the way he wrote about poker really intrigued me because he laid out what I didn't like about games, because he doesn't like games either. He said chess is boring because it's a game of perfect information. You know, give me enough computing power, I'll solve it for you. I'll tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. And by the way, von Neumann's one of the fathers of the computer, so he was able to create the thing that gives you the computing power to solve chess. And then he hated games at the other extreme, like roulette. He said that's also boring because pure gamble. There's nothing to do. It's a game where there's no skill whatsoever. He loved poker because poker to him mirrored life. It was a game of incomplete information, knowns and unknowns, and making the best decision you can with limited information, knowing that it's never going to be 100% certain because life and decision making is probabilistic. We live in a world that's probabilistic. We don't live in a world of certain outcomes. And that, when I read this, it just really, really intrigued me. He has this one beautiful sentence that I quote in the book. I might misquote it here to you, but I'll try to be as precise as I can. He said, real life consists of bluffing, of little tactics of deception, of trying to figure out what does this man think I mean to do. And that's what games are about in my theory. I was like, this is fascinating. This is psychology from a mathematician, because the guy's a mathematician. And so I started reading about poker and just something clicked. I was like, this is my book. Why don't I learn this game, immerse myself in it, get someone really, really smart to teach me, and see what happens, and use poker as a lens for exploring decision-making in life, for exploring this question of the limits of control, skill versus chance, and figuring out, you know, how do you maximize skill? How do you actually put yourself in a position to get lucky over and over and over? And when you don't get lucky, how do you move on? And how do you actually learn from that and put yourself in a position once again to make the most of it?
That is so fascinating. And I should say, I mean, I introduced you as a professional poker player off the bat, but I mean, you won tournaments, right? I mean, you went to the World Championship, World Series of Poker, and I think that's part of what's just phenomenal. And I won't give away the whole book because people really have to read it. But I'm curious if you can go through what were some of those things that early on your understanding of psychology allowed you to kind of apply and learn and helped as you were learning, you were going up the ladder.
Yeah, there were lots of elements. I think the one that was the most immediately useful, because it's what I had focused on very extensively, was self-control and being able to regulate your emotions in the moment and being able to actually separate yourself from the decision so that you could be more rational. Being able to say, you know, this isn't personal. This is business. This is actually something that you shouldn't be taking personally. And at the beginning, it was a little bit of a steep learning curve, because I did start taking it personally at first, because actually sometimes it was personal, because let's just do a little asterisk here. Poker's 97% male. Yep. And 3% females. So I entered this world, and more often than not, there were no other women there. It was just men. And a lot of times those men didn't necessarily want me at the table. And so they would bully me and they would pick on me because they thought that I was a soft target. And you know what? They were right. I was a soft target because I didn't really know what was going on. Once I realized that, first of all, it really pissed me off. I was like, okay, gotta work on this. But secondly, I had the tools to be able to work on it, because I had studied emotional management and self-control and all of these ways of being able to analyze what was happening so that I could remove myself from the situation, cool off my emotions, and then look at it dispassionately and figuring out, okay, how do I take advantage of this? How do I actually turn the tables? How do I use the fact that these people are underestimating me? How do I use it to my advantage? And when I figured out how to do that, that's when I actually started having good results and started winning, because I could figure out that, you know, this isn't personal. So let me just strategically up the aggression, up the ante. And at first it was hard for me because I'm not an aggressive person normally. And I wanted people to like me. I didn't want them to think of me as, you know, that horrible girl who is always being so nasty. But when you realize that you have to separate the two, you realize that you can be nice and aggressive. Those two things are not necessarily opposed.
Yep. I remember a point in the book when you talk about you spend so much time studying the faces of your opponents, but realizing they're studying yours, and just sort of how you use that. And I think it, again, just so much of it applies to whether we're in meetings or just social interactions, right? It all just really resonated. And I think, and it seemed like a tremendous amount of work as well. I mean, gosh, it's just sort of exhausting. But so if there were skills that you kind of came in with that you could apply, what were some of the maybe unexpected things you learned or had to learn or discovered about yourself? I guess you mentioned the being more aggressive, but
yeah, well, I mean, that's definitely something I discovered. I always felt that I was a very strong female. I'm someone who I didn't think that I was a pushover. And it's funny how real life oftentimes doesn't force you to examine your own shortcomings, because life is noisy and messy and you can always blame something else. You can always be like, well, I did everything I could, but there was nothing else to do. In poker, there are no excuses because it's a game. There are fewer variables. So you actually have to acknowledge it and be like, okay, that was me. That was on me. I screwed up and I have to actually learn to do better. So that was a surprise. The other really big surprise was I came into this thinking, poker is a very zero-sum game. And in some ways it is. I win chips, that means you lose. And you win, that means I lose. And so I didn't realize that it was actually going to help me with a lot of empathy and people reading skills that I could use in a very positive way. And that actually, if you look at poker as an ecosystem over the long term, becomes a very positive sum game and not just kind of this very stark zero-sum interaction, because you have to be someone people want to play with. There's reputation, there are all of these other concerns, and you want it to be a healthy game. If you're someone who always sits down and takes everyone's money, you're eventually not going to have anyone left to play with. No one's going to want to be in your sandbox because you're the big bully kid. And understanding that it's really all about kind of give and take is incredibly helpful. And also, poker teaches you to read people better and to actually try to ask, why is this person doing what they're doing? Where are they coming from? To actually go into their motivations and to try to figure out, who are they? Why do they think this is a good mood? Someone explained to me very early on, a poker player named Phil Galfond, that it was a very big mistake to underestimate your opponents and to say, and to judge them. And you say, oh, he's stupid. This person doesn't know what they're doing. I can't play against them. He said, no, never do that. Instead, ask why. Why are they doing this? Because everyone has a reason and everyone is acting for a reason. And that's just, what a powerful thing to just learn to do in real life always. Always ask why someone is doing something. And in poker, yeah, ultimately it helps you take their money because you can figure out how to play against them. But in life, it helps you be actually a much better listener, a better person, less judgmental, because rather than jumping to conclusions and saying, oh, this person's an idiot, you say, okay, let me just back up a second. And that pause, that backing up is so incredibly powerful. And I had no idea that poker would teach that to me. And it taught that to me also about my own mistakes and about my own decision process. Don't just decide, don't just act because, always ask why. Always ask yourself, why are you doing this? Why are you saying this? Why are you reacting that way? You become a much more reflective person that way.
I'm like just revealing my fangirlness at every turn, but something else that resonated with me was your coach, Eric, who was less concerned about like how the hand played out, but what your thought process was throughout it. And just that real, like having a clarity to your decision-making being kind of more important than, again, the element of chance that was introduced. And I think, sometimes you like sit down about to write an email and just taking that pause can be good. So it's just fascinating across the board. Picking up on talking about, the 3% of women, female poker players, can you say a bit more about how you navigated that and what you found in that community? And if there are any broader lessons you think for women in underrepresented groups, AKA the business world?
Yeah. I mean, I was shocked by the numbers, to be perfectly honest. I knew I was going into kind of a boys club, but I didn't realize it was that much of a boys club. And at first it really intimidated me. And then I actually realized that, wait, women can be really, really good poker players, because women throughout life in all of society, I mean, we live in a male dominated world. That's just reality. And so we've had to pick up skills that help us, even if we're not aware of it. You know, we've had to learn to be more subtle and read situations and read people and look at nuance, whereas guys never had to do that, because they can just come in and say, hey, I'm the big alpha male, and they never have to actually listen to the feedback quite as much, because people will listen to them anyway. We need to try to figure out, okay, how do I make myself heard? How do I read the room? How do I insert myself correctly? And that is at the heart of strategic decision making, being able to adjust to your opponents, being able to read your opponents. And so that sort of thing, I'm not saying that women are, inherently better at it than men, but we've become better at it because we have to, because we live in a society that's forced that out of us over generations and generations and generations. And that's a powerful asset. And we also don't have as much testosterone, which is very helpful, because guys take it personally. It becomes this macho competition of, who can outplay whom, who's the table captain. There's this poker expression, table captain, the person who's bossing everyone around, and all the guys want to be a table captain. And I've actually found that the best players, someone like Eric, my coach, is much more, I hate to say female in his approach, but much more kind of subtle and nuanced in his approach. And he's not just brainlessly aggressive. Instead, he knows how to read the situation and how and when to deploy the aggression strategically. And no one sees him coming, just like no one saw me coming. I said that I was kind of underestimated, and that's an underestimation. That's an understatement, because that they saw me as female, but different people saw me in a very specific light. Because, and this is very true outside of poker as well, chances are, if you're in a male dominated business, the men who judge you won't be looking at you as, first of all, a professional. They'll be looking at you as, first of all, a female. And they'll have all these stereotypes of women in similar positions. So in poker, it was always like, oh, my girlfriend plays poker, my wife plays poker, oh, like my aunt Mavis plays poker, whatever it is. And so they think that all girls play that way. And so they have this thing. And once I can figure out, okay, how do you think girls play? Fine. Okay. Do you think I never bluff? Do you think I bluff too much? Are you the kind of person who wants to be a gentleman and kind of make sure that no one, very patronizing? Are you the kind of person who wants to show me that my place is at the kitchen table and not at the poker table or the boardroom table, wherever I happen to be? Once I figure out that, I can exploit you relentlessly, and that's power. And I think that we see these attitudes towards us everywhere. And if you figure out that it's not that all men are biased against women in the same way, they'll have their own unique biases. But if you learn how to read those, if you learn.
It's just fascinating. And also, I mean, I think you describe it in this very matter-of-fact way of powering through it, but I think, to take stock of what that must have felt like and how difficult. And so I think it takes a lot of courage. What is it? I'm just sort of curious why it's so imbalanced as well. Is it, I mean, there are a million reasons, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of it is history. That it started out, poker in the United States started out in the Wild West, literally. I mean, it started out originally on the New Orleans steamboats, and then went to kind of the frontier areas. There were very male dominated things. And so we got this perception of like the guns and, and the saloons and the back tables with like the cigar smoke. And that's true. That's what poker used to be. But it's kind of stuck. And so I think a lot of times women think, oh, I don't want that. I think the other thing is that people don't understand what poker is. People see it as gambling. They see it as just another kind of casino game. They don't realize, no, actually, this is different from every other game in a casino. Every other game in a casino is gambling. Poker is a game of skill. You can win with the worst cards and you can lose with the best cards. And that is the definition of skill. In any other game in the casino, if you have the best hand, you win. If you don't, you lose. That's it. It's just chance. And you can help your odds and things like blackjack, but at the end of the day, it's just chance. And so people don't understand that. And we live in a very puritanical society where people are like, oh, gambling bad. Oh, no, you can't do that. And poker has been lumped in with that. So I think that that probably keeps a lot of women out. And finally, and unfortunately, the reality is that at the lower levels, it's not hospitable to women. And there are a lot of jerks who are really nasty to you. At the higher levels, that's not the case. I mean, poker has some of the most brilliant, nicest people I've ever met anywhere. And I mean, they could have done anything. You've got Caltech PhDs, you've got, Brown philosophy majors, you've got everyone, and people who've never finished high school, but who are brilliant. So, and you have them all playing, and they're very nice and wonderful. But if you're a female who's never played before, and you just walk into a random casino and you sit down at a random table for the lowest stakes, those are probably not going to be the friendliest people in the world. They'll be drinking and they might be friendly, but they'll hit on you. I've been propositioned. I was actually propositioned at a poker table. Like, I'm still, every time I tell the story, I'm like, did that happen? Yeah, it happened. Like, given a hotel room and a price for my services. And I still can't believe that happens. And so if I weren't me, a journalist going in for a very specific reason, had I not had all of these amazing people behind me because I'd met all of these amazing poker players and I knew what was possible, had I just walked in and had one of those experiences my first time at the table, I would have turned right around and walked out. So I think that it's not just on women to enter the game, it's on casino management, it's on the floor staff, it's on people to create an environment where that sort of behavior is not allowed. And as of now, for a long time, that wasn't the case. I would complain and they'd say, sorry, honey, can't do anything about it, because they want the business. And most of their business, 97% in fact, is male, are those guys. So that's who they want to cater to. And so it has to change from the top. And I really hope that it will.
Yeah. So what's next? What are you up to now? What's the next book, the next project? Frequently?
So I don't know what the next book is, but I'm actually expanding other areas of my creative writing. So I'm actually right now working on some screen stuff. So I'm working on a television show and I'm actually working on a screenplay. And then I'm also doing, so for people who want my journalism, my next project is actually going to be an Audible original. So I'll be working with Audible on my next very long thing. So that'll be like a novella length book. So instead of like your usual 100,000 words, it'll be closer to 20, but it will be a longer piece than you would read in a magazine, but you won't read it. You'll actually just get to hear me say it. So if you liked the Audible version of The Biggest Bluff, this one's for you.
Awesome. Are you writing about poker and chance and similar themes? Or
No, I'm actually writing about a very specific element that was in the poker book, migraines.
Ah, yes. I'm not going to say more about the book because everyone's got to read it. But okay, last question. For people who probably played one hand of poker in their life, but are inspired by this, how should we start?
I would say start by just first read a little bit. So the book that I used to get started, it's a little outdated, but it has a soft place in my heart. Special place is Harrington on Hold'em. And there are also amazing resources online. So I think the best training site is Run It Once, and it has beginner tracks. So I would check it out. You can get a free membership to begin with, and then you'll have to pay, but you can get a little feel. There's a site called Poker Go that has a lot of videos. So I would say start, watch and kind of try to get a feel for it, and then start splashing around. If you live in a state where you can play poker online legally for money, do that. Just a little money. Don't deposit too much, but it's always better to learn with real stakes than it is for play money. But if you live in a state like me, I live in New York, where that's not possible, then splash around a little for fake money, but take it seriously and actually start trying to figure out right away what you're doing and why you're doing. And the reason you're playing online is to get a feel for different sorts of situations. I would tell you, in other times, go to a casino and actually get a real feel. But these days, do not go to a casino. Do not go anywhere near an actual poker table until there's a vaccine and treatments and everything's effective. So maybe in 2021, end of 2021, you'll be able to play live poker.
Time to go, to take next level. But Well, Maria, thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing and for writing the book. And, can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's been an absolute pleasure.